Hello, microeconomics class. This is Dr. Seiwert talking about our chapter this week, and we're looking at some information about antitrust and our globalized economy and regulations. So, antitrust is an interesting one. The government has added antitrust regulations all through probably its inception when it found out people were doing things that weren't right. As far as now, we look at, I think, Twitter censorizing people. Censoring, that's not a good thing in our, then we're looking at maybe we're like another country that does that. So we don't want to get to that. So most likely the government will be looking at Twitter and Facebook and these problems about censorship and doing something about it. So on your page 603 or in your text, I guess your e-text, it has some different federal agencies that help us with social regulation. We have economic regulations, like we just talked about, antitrust, so we don't have monopolies and oligopolies. We also have some social ones, and it's kind of interesting, I think. For example, if we look at the Environmental Protection Agency, now, I'm sure most people think we don't do anything to help the environment as far as a government. But really, back in the 70s, companies were, I'll call this belching out smoke because there was nothing in place. The water bodies by these companies were filthy because they dumped everything into the water. And so really since the 70s, we've had regulation in place to not only clean up these places, but to make these factories produce clean air. Now, if you ever look at a picture of China and their smoke and their environmental problems that they have, I always like to show students in my face-to-face a picture of an airport in China, and you can't even really see to land. It's just that's the smog. That's the situation they have. So our government does do things. It's a lot better than it used to be. In fact, I went to Cuba about 3 years ago, and it was like walking back, 20, 30 years. Their water was dirty. Their factories were belching smoke, and it felt very unclean. And I was very thankful that the United States is helping us in those ways. Yes, there's always going to be something more we can do, but at least they did something. So, people environmentally, the government has been doing things and they do listen. So that's a good thing. Another thing I wanted to point out was consumer protection agencies that help us as the consumer with our problems, getting money back and that kind of thing. So we're not just at the mercy of bad business people. So that's a great one. And then our occupational safety and health administration. When you see people wearing hard hats, that's why. Because somebody earlier in this company had to suffer before these things happened. So unfortunately, that's a sad thing to think about, but it's true. Somebody else had to go through something before now we have hard hats and probably all kinds of protection now, and particularly with the pandemic, the kind of protection now that we're having. It's not mandated yet, but it might be. And if you work in a hospital, it is mandated as far as what you're wearing. And that will be partly the hospital and partly because of the our occupational safety standards. So those are good ways that the our government is helping in these manners. And like I said, economically, trying to prevent us with the monopolies. And if you think about a monopoly, used to be that there was just one phone carrier. It was called Bell. And people were at the mercy of that as far as their bills and everything. You have one person, they can charge what they want. That got broken up by the government because it was looked at as a monopoly. And we reap the benefits now, kind of, because of our cell companies. So we have some different companies we can choose from. And we have to be careful that they don't end up all merging together and we have one or two, because that's where we end up with problems. Then we don't have people competing for a better price. And we have them dictating what the price is going to be, and that's it. So as you're thinking about cell phones, let's think about how many people are out there providing service. It's gone from a lot to just a few now, and we need to really be careful that it doesn't go any smaller, so we do have competitive pricing. And so one other thing I wanted to point out in our text is there's a figure 27.3, and it shows the distribution of federal regulatory spending. And what I found interesting about it was 34% of that federal regulatory spending goes on transportation. So I'm thinking, okay, transportation, what does the government do as far as our transportation? Well, they do have Amtrak, which we probably don't really use. I have done it, and it's cool, but it's not really a way to get around, I guess. But transportation can mean a lot of things. It can mean our upgrading of our airports. We have TSA now, having better roads, having better bridges, those kinds of things. Most likely, when your state is doing something, it's going to come from the federal government. So that's good that the government is making these improvements to make our life better. Anybody that goes on the bypass probably thinks that's not really happening because it's been like that forever. At some point, hopefully we live long enough that we'll see that improvement. So anyway, the government has funds that help us to do better as far as, our clean air, our jobs, and in other areas such as transportation. Now, one thing I do want to point out is, if we want to do more with clean air, most likely that's going to come from taxes. So, it comes down to, as you guys get out of school and you're in your careers, do you want more money to go to those things? And that's fine. I'm all for programs. I think people need programs, particularly now, to help them out. But, we have to look at how much our taxes are going to different things. So, those kinds of helpful things, it's great that the government took action and it helped to save people and save our environment. So those are great things. So anyway, I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk at you later. Bye.